Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Standing on Principle with attorney Philip J. Jusino and author-educator Frank Vetro. Frank's on hiatus tonight, but Phil's here, and his special guest, I'll let Phil take it from here.
Actually, Frank is in Vegas tonight.
I was trying to be nice.
And what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So
Absolutely.
I hope he doesn't get in too much trouble.
Linda said he was on the air before.
He was?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
He was doing his thing. Yeah.
Okay, good. We have a full house tonight. Tonight we have our special guest is Antonio Graceffo. He is the Brooklyn monk. Good evening.
Good evening.
We also have my son to my right, Dan Jusino. We wanted a young perspective tonight. Dan, hello.
How you doing, guys?
We also have a friend of Antonio's. His name is Nick Cataldo.
Thank you.
He is with, I have his card, Greenview Properties. And the two of you met, I'm told, in Cambodia.
That's correct.
Which is a very interesting place to meet. We're going to get into that a little while ago. And in the peanut gallery, we have Cindy Graceffo, which is Antonio's sister. Hello. We offered her the opportunity to come on, but she decided to watch us from afar. We're going to have a great show tonight. In a little while, I'm going to introduce you to Antonio. He's going to tell you an interesting story and why he's called the Brooklyn monk. But before that, I want to pose a question to the audience. And throughout the night, Eric is going to be telling me, Eric,
Phones, lines?
right, either phone lines or
Text,
Facebook, however you want to do it.
Right.
In College Park, Maryland, in fact, I played there baseball years ago. We had a tournament when I was about 15. Very liberal enclave. And what they want to do is pass a law that will allow illegal, undocumented immigrants, aliens, to vote in local elections, not the federal government, but for local elections such as mayor, city council. And their rationale is that those people live in the community, so they should have a say in things like garbage removal, local issues. And I'm going to tell you my opinion a little bit later, but I want people to chime in. The question is, if you're here illegally, should you be allowed to vote in local elections? Not federal, but local. So we're going to get back to that. So, Antonio, you are called the Brooklyn monk. Why is that?
Ever since I was a little boy, I had a dream to go to the Shaolin Temple in China and study Kung Fu. And after 2001, I gave up my career in finance. I moved to Taiwan to learn Chinese, and then I moved to China, lived in the Shaolin Temple, and I learned Kung Fu, and I was the only
That was my
monk
next
from
question. Were you the only American or the only Brooklynite?
Both. Both. But actually, in 2003, when I was there were only... well, in the school where I was, there were no other American, no other foreigners at all. It was all Chinese and me.
Now, is it true that when you went there, it was very similar to that Jim Carrey movie where he went to that...
The Mask?
No.
Ace Ventura.
Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. Remember he goes to that temple?
Oh,
He had to go up the stairs, and then he had a slinky. He was playing with a slinky coming
that
down
was
the
a
stairs.
documentary.
That was about you, right?
That was a documentary. That was all true.
But very interesting. But when you went there, what did they make of you? You're an American, you're from Brooklyn, and you're knocking on their door, and you say, I want to become a member, I want to become one of you guys. Were they a little standoffish at first, or they said, come on in?
They were blown away. You know, I came in, I could speak Chinese, I was American, I turned up in the middle of the night, literally the middle of the night, dark. You know, I'm banging on the door just like on the TV show Kung Fu when he goes to the temple the first time. It's just like that, showing up unannounced. And they took me in. And then they're trying to figure out what's this guy doing here. And I had to give an offering at one point, and I handed them Taiwanese money. And they're like, why are you handing us Taiwanese money? I said, I live in Taiwan. And then they're like, so you got this guy from Brooklyn who lives in Taiwan, who speaks Chinese, and he wants to live with us.
And you speak many other languages, too?
Yeah.
About 7 other?
Something like that, yeah.
Now, did they think you were a spy at first?
No, you know what's funny, though? They pulled me aside a bunch of times. They pulled me aside and they went, how do you know about the temple? I go, everybody knows about the temple. It's on TV, it's on cartoons, it's on books. They went, oh, but how do you know about it?
Was it like a monastery?
Yeah, it's a monastery.
It actually, like a monastery. Okay.
Yeah, it's an actual monastery.
Pretty interesting. Now, your friend Nicholas here, you said you met in Cambodia. Now, when you said that most people that I know didn't meet in Cambodia. How did that happen?
He was bringing me food in jail. No. Nick, go ahead.
With
tell
you,
him.
I never know.
We met
Doesn't
at a
make him
house
a bad
party.
person.
Doesn't
though.
make
We met at a house party. It was an assorted group of people from all around the world. I heard his accent, and I'm like, "You sound like me." And
Yeah, like in a room full of like 300 people, I heard his accent. He heard my accent.
that was it.
That was it.
The rest is history. You know, then the following day we hung out and been pretty good friends since.
Then we found out he lives around the corner from my sister.
Right. Yeah.
Small world. Now, when I was reading on Facebook, now you were in Australia for a while?
No, so I work, so I'm a professor and I work for an Australian university, but it's in China.
Okay.
I'm going to Australia this Saturday and Friday. I leave for Australia. I have to go to the home university for some training before I go back to China.
Okay, I got it. Now, what I wanted to do tonight is talk about a number of issues involving China, because obviously you were there. Now, Nick, were you in China too?
No, just strictly Southeast Asia. Most of my time in Cambodia.
And you were doing real estate there, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so most real estate agents I talk to, if they do real estate in Florida, that's pretty far away.
Right. Yeah.
Cambodia, you should do a reality show. That'd be interesting.
Well, I'm sure Antonio will share with you how much China is a big player in that market
Yeah,
also.
Mm-hmm. Now, today was pretty scary, and I'm going to talk to Danny in a second, that they're talking about North Korea's capabilities to strike America. And it might be sooner than we thought. Now, Dan, I know you read the news and you watch the news. And what's your take on North Korea? If you were Donald Trump, what are some of the things you'd be thinking about right now to deal with that guy and Jung?
He's made some pretty strong statements in the last couple of days, especially the one where he was saying we're going to show them fury and rage like the world has never seen before. But Rex Tillerson also said something, too, about how he wanted to, the biggest symbol from North Korea that they want to talk is if they stop doing the launches. Now, we all know, and through history, we know that they're not going to stop the launches for any reason. That's the only thing in their eyes keeping them alive. The second they do that, they lose their edge and then we can invade. So I think we need to take a more progressive step. And I'm not saying more of a military option. I'm saying maybe something like a quarantine of the island, where you don't allow anything in or out. And we know, because if we put sanctions on them, happens before. He just starves his people and diverts everything towards the army, military, and everything that they could do to make sure that the war machine doesn't stop. So I think that we need to take a more progressive step in making sure that their industries can no longer grow. Right. And make sure that food is the only thing that they could gain access to, because we don't want another starving thing like that happen in the 90s and whatnot.
Now, Tillerson, I know, had said also that China has to take a bigger...
We definitely need China's support on that. 'Cause
right.
If we don't have China's support, or even neighboring nations like Japan and South Korea, the quarantine wouldn't even be possible. So there has to be more cooperation in Southeast Asia to make sure that the North Korean threat doesn't spill out.
Right. Now, Antonio, what is your take on that? Now, having lived in China, what do you think China, the leadership of China, what are they thinking right now?
See, the issue China has with North Korea is that China has more borders than any other country on the planet. I believe it's either 16 or 18. I should probably know that, but I don't. And all their borders hate them. Okay, so you got Vietnam, you got India, who they've had wars with. So basically, the only official ally, according to the CIA World Factbook, the only official ally that China actually has is North Korea. North Korea is very important to China because if the U.S. were to invade North Korea, there would then be a border between China and the U.S. A border between South Korea. And, so in other words, South Korea moves all the way up to the border of China. That's the same as the U.S. moving all the way up to the border of China. So China needs to keep North Korea there as a buffer. So that's one of the reasons why, as your son just mentioned, we need China's support for anything that we would do militarily.
But are we going to get it?
Well, it's very interesting. So I saw in the last few weeks, China has been building up troops on the border of Sikkim. And China and India have had military incursions before. There's a disputed territory called Sikkim. China's now building up troops in Sikkim. They're building up troops on the North Korea border as well. What I suspect is going to happen, and there's also a lot playing out between U.S., India, and then China, Pakistan. And what I believe is that there will be some backroom negotiation, some agreement reached, where China will tell us what policy we're allowed to take with North Korea, and then we will agree to some policy that they want to take regarding India.
Right. Now, I think I see as a wild card Donald Trump himself, because he's not your regular politician that's going to follow, I guess, the proper channels. You heard him speaking tonight, and Danny alluded to it. We're going to basically fire and brimstone. Now, if it was Obama, it would be a different take entirely. George Bush, Reagan, they're all individuals, and they would have come up with their own solution. But what concerns me is we have to do something. I'm not saying we're going to bomb them tomorrow, but the leader of North Korea, I think, people might say he's unpredictable. I think he's pretty predictable. He wants to do something. He's saying he's going to do it. Why do you think he's flexing his muscles? What does he want to get out of it? What's his end game?
It's as your son said, the absolute only thing that North Korea can do to remain relevant is to threaten us and to keep sending these missiles, keep launching these missiles. It's the only thing they can do. They don't produce anything. Its population of whatever, 16 million or whatever it is. It's one of the poorest countries on the earth. They have absolutely no importance in the universe except that they can build missiles or threaten to build missiles to attack South Korea, Japan, and the U.S.
But what's their end game? What do they want to get out of this? What do they think? America's going to give them money?
Well, I'm sure there's also some sort of pride involved in it that this small, like you just said, this small country that they can compete with us now that they have an ICBM, and now that, after the world basically telling them that you're not going to get this, you're not going to get this, and then here we are, 2017, they have a missile that could reach most of the Midwest. And actually, recently they just said that they have the capabilities to miniaturizing warheads, so they could put those missiles on missiles that can reach us now.
But as far as money goes, I mean, the U.S. is actually a donor to North Korea. A lot of people don't realize that. A lot of the food aid and that comes from the U.S.
But is that going to continue?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that will continue.
For humanitarian reasons.
For humanitarian reasons,
nothing
for
else.
Political reasons. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why. Nobody wants a starving North Korea. Nobody wants a, crazy, mad, insane North Korea, right? It wouldn't help China, wouldn't help us, certainly wouldn't help South Korea.
Nicholas, what's your take on that?
I don't think we should get involved. That's not our business. That's China. Obviously, China is aligned with North Korea. And mind you, I mean, we already went to war with North Korea, and that didn't really work out so well. And I think Americans have a very short. It is called the Forgotten War.
50 to 53.
Right. Exactly.
Nash came out of that.
My dad's a Korean War veteran.
Oh, yeah?
Right. So
Korean conflict, actually.
Yeah, Korean conflict.
Right, and I think there's a lot more that's being played out that we don't really seem to know.
Right, but if they have the ability to hit our mainland, what do we wait for?
Well, why would we get involved? The reason why they're doing this is because we're being the aggressor. I think we're being the aggressor during all this. What have they done to us? I have not met a North Korean. Neither have you. So I don't see why we would want to.
But it doesn't scare you that the actual their people are being fed total...
we have the biggest military in the world, and mind you, North Korea's military is also not a joke. If we go to war with North Korea, it's an automatic war with China, and they have over a billion of people.
That's what concerns me.
Yeah, I mean, this is the question. So you got a Donald Trump in there. So I could tell you politically and economically, there's this theory, that theory, the other theory. At the end of the day, Donald Trump may very well be a wild card who's going to act without thinking this through or disregarding that advice that he's hearing from those people, or maybe he's not hearing it, or maybe he's not processing. So with the Donald Trump in the White House, there's always the possibility that he's just going to strike. Mm-hmm. And then the question is, what Nick said, well, is that automatically a war with China? Maybe, maybe not. China, we are China's largest customer for exports. The trade surplus that China runs with the United States is equal to the GDP growth, or about 50% of the total GDP growth, which means that if they lose us as a customer, their economy grinds to a halt. So would China, and this is the question, would China be willing to risk their trade relation with the U.S. in order to defend North Korea? And I honestly don't think they would, but China absolutely doesn't want the U.S. on their border.
Right.
So I'm not sure what that means, like which way this would play out. So I think that I predict, if I have to make a prediction, now I'm a monk, I'm not allowed to gamble. We can't put any money on this, all right? But if I'm going to make a prediction, I will predict that 20 years from now, when I come home for Christmas and we sit down and we talk about this, you're going to go, well, what do you think's going to happen with North Korea? We're going to be in the same, I don't think anything's going to change. I don't think it can't change. The only way it changes is if Donald Trump pulls a radical move.
So on you think is just saber rattling?
It's saber rattling.
Okay. And I hope that's all there is.
And I hope you're still here 20 years from now.
I think we will be. Eric, you're going to still be here 20 years?
Right here, I never leave. Okay. I'm always here.
He'll be here 20 years from now. What is Chinese? What is their take on President Trump? What do they think of the guy?
It's really funny. I just did a piece for the Foreign Policy Journal, which is what does China think of Trump? So I read Chinese media before the election, during the election, and after the election, and what the Chinese media was saying about him. Of course, it's all state. There's no such thing as free media in China, so it's all state media.
Do they have CNN there?
What's that?
Do they have CNN?
No. Well, CNN's blocked. Wall Street Journal is blocked. New York Times is blocked. Any Google.
I bet they have Fox, though, right?
Fox is blocked. But anyway, it was really interesting. Going into the election, they kept saying he's dangerous, and they even called him a buffoon. But then they were saying, but he's a really good businessman, and they really thought he was going to be good for China because China wants to do business. Part of him. Yeah, and they want to do business. So they go, so now we got a businessman to deal with. We like that. But you know what was funny? Even when they said he's a buffoon, he's dangerous, he's a great businessman, we want to do business with him. Every one of those evolutions, they also said, and thank God he's not Hillary. They hated Hillary for some reason.
They hated her.
And they believed that Hillary was going to push, for example, human rights and say things like, we're not going to trade with you if you don't improve your human rights, or if you don't allow the Dalai Lama, or whatever it was. And they see that as a violation of their sovereignty, that you're dictating from outside the way they should behave within their own internal policies. And they didn't like Obama for that reason. And they very much didn't like Hillary. So it was really funny. All the articles I read sort of ended with, well, Donald Trump has a lot of problems, but it's better than Hillary, and
the lesser of two evils.
Lesser of two evils, yeah.
Nick, Cambodia, small country, right? What is? You ever talked to anybody? When was the last time you were there?
April.
Oh, recently. Yes. Okay. And what does the Cambodian government, let's say, think of Donald Trump?
They like the leader is Hun Sen. He's been the dictator since I think 1985.
He's been he was actually even in power under the Vietnamese colony, so he's been in power more or less since 1980.
He requested a "Make America Great Again" hat.
He did.
Yeah.
Did.
That's interesting. Now, Eric, what other radio show are you going to hear tidbits like this? I don't think you're going to hear it.
I want you. You know what? And I'm gonna go out on a limb here, and I'm going to let you know that Phil Jusino is going to send him his "Make America Great" hat.
I bought about 13. I saw this ad. I bought about 13 hats, some black, some red.
You're going to send one as a gift to the president of Cambodia?
Prime Minister
of Cambodia is a gift from Phil Jusino.
See, I wear the black one because it doesn't stand out as much as the red hat. And when I go to the gym, I go to the store, and sometimes someone looks at me funny, and I wear it,
I know
and
you
they look at me funny, and I don't really, I'm wearing the hat.
Yeah.
But you know how many people come up to me and say, nice, were you there with me one time? We went to Home Depot. Well, that was Jackie, my daughter. And somebody came up and said, I like your hat. I'm glad you have the guts to wear it.
Yeah, you see a lot of Trump bumper stickers.
Although, I'll be honest with you, I'm probably not going to wear it to a restaurant because I don't want some liberal spitting in my food. Right? I thought about that. You got to think about those things. You never know. You walk into a restaurant with that hat on and someone says, I'm going to get this guy.
There is a question to Nick, actually. With regards to Cambodia, they're saying that you see a lot in the movies, like the Chuck Norris movies and the Rocky Rambo movies and everything like that.
That was him.
Compare, how is what we're seeing in the make-believe movies as to what Cambodia is?
Not even remotely close.
Not even remotely close.
It was, to my ignorance, I was really disappointed when I got there. Like, where are the jungles? Where's these rivers?
Yeah.
It's not. The movie Apocalypse Now was actually shot in the Philippines, even though that movie is supposed to take place in Cambodia. But once you get on the riverbanks and stuff, it's nothing like that.
Absolutely.
So. Okay.
All right.
Now, do you know much about the criminal justice system in China?
Not really, no. I'm an economist. I just deal with the economy, and I try and avoid the criminal justice system.
Because I always wondered about that. Like, I'm a former prosecutor, criminal defense attorney now, and we have a certain criminal justice system, which is pretty good, not perfect. And we take every opportunity to talk about it, some of the abuses and things like that. But you always wonder, these countries like Russia, China, how do they deal with people that break the law?
All over Asia, you're going to find that prosecutors have a 90-some-odd% prosecution rate. So basically, if you get arrested and you wind up in court, they just assume you're guilty, and
they plea bargain?
Their duty is to find you guilty.
But do they plea bargain like here?
Probably, yeah, they would. But man, in China, sometimes the penalties are just so severe. it could be 20 years, 50 years for some, some crime.
Hard labor?
Yeah, hard labor. One of my books I wrote across the desert, and there was a camp, and these guys were working, and they're the only people I'd seen like in days, and they invited me into the camp, and they gave me food and stuff. And the whole time I was going, I wonder if this is one of those labor camps, because I know they send them up to the desert, and I didn't see any guards. I'm like, they don't need any. They're in the middle of the desert. Where are they going to go? I had the only bicycle.
Nick, I have a question. You said you did real estate in Cambodia. Was it houses, apartments? What kind of real estate?
A little bit of commercial and residential. I did it for mostly expatriates coming from England, France, and America, moving over there, guys that were much older, that they wanted to buy pieces of property, renovate them, and live out their retirement there.
What's the average house? I know average is for a country, but what? Give me if you said in America, you might say $300,000-$400,000. What is it in Cambodia?
I know for my apartment, which was a studio, fairly big, maybe about 1,000 square feet, 2 balconies, was about $20,000 US.
Mm-hmm. How about a house? Do they have traditional houses like we have here?
Yeah, they do. So. But again, inside the capital, obviously, it's much more. Since I left, the property values are skyrocketing since the time I left and everything. So.
Yeah, if you wanted a freestanding house that looks like something like you'd have on Long Island, that would only be for the top, 1% of people.
Oh, really?
And it probably costs the same as it would on Long Island. It'd be hundreds of thousands, up to millions even.
Correct. Now, Danny, Nicholas is going to make you an offer as to sell some real estate in Cambodia. What do you think?
Oh, if you pay, full expenses, I'll do it.
What's the commission there?
Usually the same rate as here. It's about 3 to 4%.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But it's not. You don't have the same land rights as you do as in the United States.
You don't own it. What do you lease it?
You're not allowed to own the ground floor. If you are married to a local, it's a 49-51% split. So she gets 51%, and you get 49%.
Does that come with DirecTV?
Yeah, right. So, there's a lot of people moving over there from the West because they like it's a very open market, free market style, libertarianism, if you would like to call it. But again, it's not your country, and, you're going to be playing on their rules.
Now, Eric, we got to try to muscle into that market, Cambodia. What do you think?
You know what? You know what? I'd be at this point going into a country that I know absolutely nothing about. Would scare me a little bit, especially with the way the world is today.
Sure.
So if I had a guy like Nick, that I could say, okay, listen, I'm going to piggyback along with. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean?
I would say absolutely not. Don't do that.
There you go.
A lot of guys from America, Australia go in. They go in like on a holiday. They see how cheap it is and how nice it is. Also, it's a very pleasant country, and they go in with a lot of money, and they come out with it all gone.
That's a shame. Antonio, one time, this is a while ago. I think Eric will remember. We did a show. I think we were in the other studio.
No, we were here. He was here.
The call from Australia.
Oh yeah.
No, that was the other.
That was upstairs. Yeah, you're right.
Right, and we were talking about Second Amendment, gun control. We actually got a call from Australia.
Wow.
Right on the show.
Pretty popular. He was a popular politician over there.
Right. And
yeah.
And you can understand him when he talks?
Sure.
Yeah. I asked him if he knew Crocodile Dundee.
Right. And in fact, I asked him, it's funny, I said, what about Walkabout Creek? Have you heard it? He said, that's a movie set.
Wow.
So, Crocodile Dundee.
Yeah.
I said Walkabout Creek, so
Yeah.
I thought that was funny. But
that's not a knife,
Yeah.
So but everybody with Australia, I go back to like Mad Max, that type of thing. But no, I'm very happy living in America, know. And if I can't make it here, I don't know if I make it in Cambodia. You know what I'm saying? So, but people are like in awe of the monk because they are because and I think I remember back to your story when you were originally here, when you grew up in Brooklyn. If I'm remembering correctly, they told you that wasn't it? You were like basically put down or told that you weren't going to succeed, or how did that?
Yeah,
go?
well, I'm dyslexic,
right?
And,
that's what I was getting.
Yeah, so I barely graduated high school. The only reason I graduated is because I was ill my senior year and I was homeschooled for part of it, and basically my homeschool teacher, put down a D for biology or something that I would have failed, and so I graduated high school with 1.9 GPA.
But tell the audience now, Your degrees.
So I've got.
I don't mean to interrupt, Phil, but they got to hear
Yeah,
this.
sure.
You know.
So yeah, I got my bachelor's degree in foreign language from Tennessee State University. I have a graduate degree in teaching from Trinity College, University of London. Graduate degree in business from Edinburgh, Heriot-Watt University, Edinburgh, in Scotland. I did 4 years of applied linguistics translation research at University of Mainz in Germany, and then did a China-MBA at Shanghai Jiaotong University in Shanghai. Got my PhD from Shanghai University of Sport, and now I'm doing a second PhD in economics at Shanghai
That's
University.
dizzying.
I told him that my son Martin wanted to meet you, right? And I was telling him about you on the way in before his mother picked him up. And when I explained to him that you grew up in Brooklyn and that you were basically told, you weren't going to succeed, and then I told him what you had done, and he looked you up and he was reading about you on Facebook. He looked up at me and goes, he laughed a little bit, like chuckled to himself, like, now tell him he can't succeed. And it's like this story that is, if you put your mind to it and you have
true.
devotion. I mean, this is a man that went and knocked on the door of a temple, and said, teach me. You know what I mean? And that it's just.
I got to
great.
tell you something though. If anybody out there that deals with kids, it's so important to encourage them. I mean, you're a father. Fortunately, I'm not a father, but you know this. But it's so important to encourage the kids. And when you tell a kid that he can't do it, yeah, okay. In my case, maybe you said, you know what, it motivated me, and I succeeded. But you know what? You never lose that. You never. To this day, I feel uneducated. To this day, I feel like I have to do more. And it's because I took one of those aptitude tests in high school, and I can't do anything mechanical. If you're dyslexic, you can't do mechanical things. You can't work with tools. You can't do systems, any kind of gears, folding boxes. You can't do it. So I scored zeros on all of those things. And then I scored very low on all the academic things because I couldn't read well enough or couldn't, on the Scantron, you got to fill in the little circles.
Right.
Well, they move around when I look at them.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So I had them telling me, you're actually not fit to do anything. And
That's what I was getting at. That's what you told us the last. Yeah, they told this man he's not fit to do anything, and look at him. It's success.
Well, look, as a parent, it's funny. I have my son sitting next to me. I'm a firm believer in encouraging your kids, but also being realistic to some point. I use this as an example. Let's say you had a kid who was 4'2", and he said he wanted to be a professional basketball player. Obviously, you want to encourage the kid. You don't want to say you can't do this, but you also want to play to their strengths, I would hope, right?
Yeah. I think it's good to say to somebody that you determine what your success is, and you play to your top level of success. Now, if you're 4'2" and you even make it onto the team, right? That's a major, and you need to feel that. You need to make sure that they feel that the thing that they did is at the best of their ability. It was to the best of their discipline, their hard work ethic, and when they achieve that, that's the success. He doesn't have to be Wilt Chamberlain.
Right. Well, Michael Jordan, he was cut, I think, his JV team. Now, he could have quit. He became one of the greatest basketball players ever to play the game, and he didn't make his JV team, which is pretty amazing. But he blossomed later. Like, you look at Russia and some of the, I guess, like the communist-type countries. They look at kids at a young age.
Yeah.
And, very young age. You're going to be a gymnast. You're going to be a hockey player. Some kids are late bloomers. Where they could, what if Michael Jordan was in Russia and they said, no, you don't have what it takes.
Yeah.
They would have lost out on a talent like that.
Yeah, well, I did my PhD at a sports university. So all my teammates,
You got all the bases covered, don't you?
They were all they were all pre-selected, as children. They were selected as children.
Very young ages.
My one of my best training partners, he's a judo champion, and I said to him, "How did he get into judo?" He said, "Well, when the recruiter came to my village, I was fat. He was like a fat 9-year-old boy. So they said, okay, we'll put you in wrestling because you're fat." He really didn't even know what wrestling was. He did it for like a year. He hated it. And he was in the wrestling hall. He saw the judo team. He said, "Oh, I want to try that." And, that's been his lifelong, he's been a judo, but he was pre-selected. And like on the wrestling team, everybody was just genetically, my kickboxing teacher is 6'3", something like this, 90 kgs, Chinese guy, 6'3", 90 kgs, Chinese guy. 90 kg, 200 pounds, no body fat. He was selected as a child. He could do backflips, front flips, somersaults, whatever. 6'3", 190 pounds.
I just want to let everybody know the phone lines are open, 888-583-9930. That's 888-583-9930 if you want to call in, if you want to say something, you got comments, questions.
And I still want some input on Maryland passing, not Maryland, the state of Maryland, but actually College Park, Maryland, passing a law that would allow illegal immigrants to vote in local elections. I want some people's input. Now, we talk a lot about capitalism and socialism. You know, we had socialists like Bernie Sanders running for president. He did quite well. You know, if it wasn't stacked against him, he might have taken the Democratic nod. What kind of capitalism is there in China? Because obviously there's got to be some form of capitalism. They want to make money. They're in business.
Yeah, so the Chinese call their system, they call it socialism with Chinese characteristics. Now, economists are beginning to call this type of system market socialism. So basically, you still have 100% communist government. You have Communist Party. You essentially have a one-party system. There's been no liberalization of the political system, but there's been a liberalization of the economic system. So in terms of, for a normal citizen, you have a job, you get a salary, you decide how you're going to spend it, you put it in the bank, and you do all the same things you do here. You take a loan to buy a house, everything, that part's the same.
But they control the production?
They control. So what happens is the government, about 30% of the companies are directly owned by the government, and even companies that are traded on the New York Stock Exchange, like all the major banks in China are traded on the New York Stock Exchange. Those are state-owned companies. They release a certain percentage of the stock to trade on the stock exchange, but the government retains a majority share.
What about Alibaba?
Yeah, so Alibaba is a completely free company. However, so in other words, privately owned, now publicly traded, is not a government company. However, it's in a protected sector, which means the government has a lot of influence with what happens with Alibaba.
Danny, I have a question for you. You see a lot of millennials, a lot of the Bernie Sanders supporters, okay. They think socialism is the greatest thing since sliced bread. They really believe that. Now, I don't know if you're strictly a millennial. I think the millennials are maybe a little bit older. But why do you think kids, let's say your age, a little older, why would they gravitate towards somebody like Bernie Sanders if they know that America is successful because it had capitalism? Why is that?
I really think a lot more of it had to do with the fact that Donald Trump was running, and they're polar opposites. One is somebody who's running, and when you think about it, Bernie Sanders had that righteousness behind him. You know, he was always trying to be up for the people. He was always trying to say, look, it needs to be a fair playing field, and capitalism is all about if you work for it, you can get it.
It's evil. They play it up as it's evil.
They kind of pitted it so like capitalism is evil, and this is how the system should be to be more fair for everybody. But I think it was more of a social thing. I think that
it's cool to be a socialist.
Exactly. I think that a lot of the social media played a lot of it too. Bernie Sanders was everywhere on social media, and Donald Trump was everywhere on social media, but on the negative spectrum of it.
In other words, the lines were clearly drawn.
The lines are clearly drawn, and any story you saw about Donald Trump was negative. Anything that you heard about Bernie Sanders was positive. So it was very much out there for people. I don't have much social media, but I'm saying for people who had it, it's very much out there in your face. And everyone likes things, so you see who has political views. And you see if somebody, like a Bernie Sanders thing, has like 10,000 likes. You don't really think much of it. You're just going to click it. You're just going to click the like. And so it's just, I think it was more of like a suction thing into it. But it definitely was the cool thing to be the liberal.
What's interesting is I was on a radio show, 103.9 FM, and I was a guest. And the guy next to me was a Bernie Sanders supporter. He must have been maybe 25, 26. And he was convinced that capitalism was not the way to go. And I had a conversation before we went on air. And I said, but how do you think America prospered? You know what I mean? It wasn't because the government controlled everything. People took risks. If you had a good idea. I remember Levi Strauss, they were brothers. One had to take a boat all the way around to get to California because they wanted the gold rush was going on, and they were going to sell their product. And it's risks. People died, in pursuit of their dreams. And it wasn't the government doing it. If anything, like remember when Obama said, you didn't make that. That was kind of insulting because he said, yeah, we didn't make the roads, but come on. Yes, the government can make the roads and all that, but we're the one, like I have my own practice. I don't need the government other than providing a defense for me and all that. I want the government out of my pocket. And I always joke around and I say, like you say, a lot of the blacks tend to be Democrats, right? But the successful ones, a lot of times you see, they become Republicans because they see that, hey, I can make it on my own. I don't need the government. And I think it's kind of insulting if you say you need the government to protect a class of people. You don't. If you work hard, you can become successful. Now, when you talk about communism in China, it's almost foreign to me because you think that, like, let's say take Cambodia for instance. What is their economic situation?
It's relatively poor, but it's a developing country thanks to little to no taxes. I think that's part of the reason
Really?
why it's being pulled up. But mind you, that they had the worst communist revolution in history. They had Pol Pot, year zero,
Right.
and
Right.
and I think the big problem in America is Americans have never got a taste of socialism.
Look at
yet.
Venezuela.
Well, yeah, Venezuela is a good example. That's peanuts compared to what Russia, China, and Cambodia, Vietnam, some countries in Africa have dealt with. And so a lot of these millennials, people my age, have had a very good life. They think it can be better. It can be better.
Now, when you say it's a developing country, how do these countries, the smaller countries, how do they develop? Do they take the chains off some of these people and let them invest and let them develop businesses? Is that
It's nepotism. There's a
lot
lot
of
of
that.
it's heavy in nepotism. A lot of connections to the government. It's a one
like South
party
America?
system.
You have a lot of these, puppet regimes.
Right. Also, a lot of the projects in Cambodia are subsidized by the government. I mean, their leader is, in fact, a socialist. He came out of the communist revolution.
Yeah, effectively the only party is the Cambodian People's Party. So it was the Communist Party.
Right.
When I worked for them, 2003, when I was working for the Cambodian government, they would actually still use the word communist. They didn't believe that they were communist, but they just referred to the party as the Communist Party. Oh, the Communist Party wants us to do this or that. Today, they never use the word communist, but it's still called the Cambodian People's Party.
Now, is the American, we have the American dream. You can be born with nothing and become rich. Do they have, what's their version in China? Can you do that? Can you be born?
Alibaba.
Okay.
Alibaba. Jack Ma is the first. He's kind of like Donald Trump. That, if you take away all these sort of, a lot of people hate him, but I don't mean that. But I mean, as far as being like a Richard Branson,
Sure.
That kind of like a famous, wealthy guy that everybody admires and respects. And he was an English teacher. His salary was $40 a month. And he started this Alibaba.
But
company.
is that an aberration? Like in America, a lot of people can become successful if you work hard. Is what he did something that's, far from the main?
The issue in China is that, as I told you a minute ago, the government controls 30% of the companies. But the other issue is that there are what's called protected sectors of the economy. So you're not allowed to function in those sectors. You're not allowed, even Chinese people can't open a company in that sector. So, for example, if I ask you what's the most popular social media app in the world, what would you say?
Facebook, Twitter, one of the two?
Yeah, it's WeChat. And why is it WeChat? Because it's in a protected sector, and it's only in China, but it's in a protected sector, and 100% of the people use it. Mm-hmm. So you get 100% of the Chinese people using it. It's the number
WeChat.
one. Yeah. What's the number one semiconductor company in the world? It's a company called Huawei, which is in a protected sector, has ties to the government, and nobody else is allowed to go into that sector. So you have the China dream. Actually, is very. They use this phrase now, the China dream. A little different than the American dream, because their China dream is that the whole country, China's going to become the new America, basically, be the new rich country.
It's a collective dream.
It's a collective dream.
As opposed to an individual.
And as an individual, you do have the hope that in the new China, with the you can work your way up, you can make a company, make money. But at the end of the day, you're always stifled by the fact that if you're not in a government company or with government contacts or in an open sector, you may not be able to get loans from the bank. You may not be able to get financing. You may not be able to buy raw materials. So that you're very limited as to how far you can go.
Okay. Now, Danny, you're 20 years old and you have friends your age. What do they think of the American dream? Do you guys discuss it? Do you realize that you live in my opinion, the greatest country in the world, and the sky's the limit often?
A lot of people don't realize it. They don't see how lucky they are to be here. I honestly do think that I'm very lucky. Only 300 million people live in America, and there's billions of people here. And I sometimes think that a lot of the people that I know don't take full advantage of it as they should. And even myself, sometimes I wonder, am I taking full advantage of it? But I don't think that it is as prevalent as it was back then, like when Reagan, like people, the American dream. I don't think it's as,
Right.
I don't think it has that.
Rugged individualism.
Yeah, I don't think it has that 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 pride that it did back then. I hope I'm wrong, but I mean, that's just how I feel right now about it. Some people really just don't, and the enthusiasm and the work ethic to get better, to get ahead, it's just really starting to die out.
That's it. I also want to talk a little bit about immigration. Now, that's Donald Trump, when he came down that escalator, one of the first things he said is, we got to build a wall. That was key. And I still believe in some form he wants to make that happen. And that, if it doesn't happen, that's going to be one of the things that the people that supported him are going to point to and say, look, that was one of the, healthcare, sure, but build that wall. In China, like for instance, right now, if I wanted to become a Chinese citizen, is that even possible?
It's essentially impossible. It's essentially impossible to become a naturalized Chinese citizen. If you have one parent is Chinese, one parent is foreign, and a baby is born, it's actually tricky sometimes to get
no
the
Dream Act
citizenship for the kid. No, no, and I mean, kids where the mother is legitimately a Chinese citizen, the father's American, and then they go to get the citizenship for the kid. It's not a given that and it's sometimes difficult to do. They might get the citizenship. The kid may not be allowed to go to public school.
but they could stay.
If they
China,
got the proper, if they got the citizenship, yes. If they don't get the citizenship, I know people who have to fly with their baby or their child once a month or every 60 days, fly out of the country, renew their visa, and come back. I know people in that boat.
Now, earlier you said that China has about 16 to 18 borders.
Yeah.
All right, something like that. And so do they have a problem with immigration, people coming into China that are not legal?
The only place where you have that is North Korea. It's the China-North Korea border. Because there's ethnic North Koreans who are Chinese citizens and have been, for centuries, right? So there's 56 ethnic groups in China. One of them is Korean, Chaoshan, North Korean. So there's already North Korean villages in China, which these people are legitimate Chinese citizens and always have been for centuries. So North Korean refugees, let's call them, will sneak out of North Korea and then hide in these villages because it's easier for them to disappear in these villages. So there are illegal North Koreans working in those villages, but apart from that, no, you don't have this. Nobody. You would have to be really, 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 really poor and desperate to want to sneak into China and live illegally.
Right.
I don't know why you would do that.
No benefit to it.
But you know what you do have? You have a lot of particularly Africans who come into China legally and then overstay their visa. And
I was going to say that before.
Yeah.
Overstaying your visas.
Yeah.
It's a problem here too.
Yeah, that's a huge problem in China because so that's a little different. So those guys will come in and they might be selling products. They might be, and it might be drugs, and it might not be drugs. It might be legitimate products, right? Legitimate things. But anyway, for them, they're coming from countries where they were earning $300 or $400 a month. So if they could make a few sales every week, they're making a lot more money, and they'll do it until they get caught.
Mm-hmm. Does Cambodia have a problem with that?
It's the same deal. They have a very poor. Cambodia has a fairly porous border, but the countries that they're surrounded by, actually the people don't look like them. Vietnamese do not look like Cambodians. The Thais do not look like Cambodians. So you coming in, they already know you don't belong here, and they tend to the visa,
I wouldn't fit in.
Yeah, right. So they kind of they're very, I don't want to say xenophobic, but they already know you don't belong here.
Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Great Wall of China. I did a little research. Now, I think it said it was first started in 771 with the first emperor. So you're talking about 2,800 years ago.
Yeah.
The Great Wall of China was started. Now, it's amazing to me that thing's still standing. They use union labor?
Labor, yeah, union.
I heard it was like soldiers, criminals. They used everybody to build that. But it's an amazing thing, and the reason they did it was to protect its citizens. So it's a concept that goes back thousands of years, and we say it now. And if you say I want to build a wall, you're called racist.
Right.
In some circles, they say, "Oh, you must be racist. You want to keep." But the Great Wall of China was symbolic of a country trying to protect its citizens, and the thing stands. I heard that's the only man-made object that you can see from space. It looks like a string, right? You can't see, the buildings. It doesn't matter. You can see the Great Wall of China, and is that still a great source of pride for the Chinese people?
Yeah, and also psychologically, it's very interesting. The name for China is Zhongguo. They call it Zhongguo, and that means the middle country. So they've always seen themselves as the middle of the earth, and everything else radiates out from them. And I don't know if you've been overseas a lot, but when you get a map in a foreign country, I don't know if you know this, but you get a map in a foreign country, that country is always the center of the map.
Oh, really? I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
It's like the first time I was in Germany and someone handed me a map. I'm like, I can't get oriented. What's wrong? Then it hit me. I'm like, oh my God, Germany's in the center. So it's really weird looking at a map of the world with China in the center. But it's also really interesting psychologically because it teaches you this is their view of the earth.
Right.
This is their view of the world, And then they got that wall around it. And the Chinese character for Zhongguo, the Zhong part looks like a wall. It's got a wall around it. And even the word for country, the traditional character of country, has a wall around it.
Now, you said there are 16 or 18 borders. How many of those borders has part of the Great Wall of China between them and the other country?
Almost all of them.
Really?
Yeah, sure.
It's that big that
Oh, yeah. No, yeah. It goes almost, I don't think it's
amazing.
100%, but it's almost all the way around. Yeah.
you've walked on it, I'm sure.
Yeah. I've been on the one just above Beijing.
It's pretty awesome, huh?
Yeah. I mean, it's thick. I mean, it's like seriously thick. Yeah, I don't know how, whatever, it's 50 meters thick or something, like, you walk on it.
We have a
It's
question.
road.
What's if somebody, tourist-wise, how are tourists treated if somebody wanted to travel to China?
Oh, tourists are treated very well in China. Yeah, that's not a problem. They're promoting tourism a lot, and government. There's no crime in China at all. There's absolutely no crime. As a tourist, you're probably never going to get ripped off in China. It's just not something that.
And what would the reason for that? The fact that there's no crime be? They're harsh penalties, or?
It might be that. I mean, it might be because of harsh penalties. I don't know. It's just not in their character. I don't know. But I mean, it's really preposterously safe in China.
Social cohesion.
Social cohesion.
Very
I don't know.
homogeneous. It's like very.
It's very homogeneous.
Yeah, that
Even though
makes
they
a
have
difference.
56 ethnic groups, but
What's that?
they have 56 ethnic groups, and they're very proud of that. But the Han, which are the Chinese ethnicity, is like 97% of the population.
Okay. That's interesting. Now, let's go to talk about Cambodia, because again, it's an interesting show where we're able to talk about China, Cambodia. What's the crime like in Cambodia?
Crime? Mostly petty crime. Mostly, it's all
snatching.
Purse snatching, things like that.
Motorcycle theft.
They cleaned up the country pretty well about 20 years ago, taking all the guns away and stuff like that. I think
No Second Amendment there?
no. Unfortunately, the police are usually the criminals.
Really?
Yeah, so
corruption?
you don't. I can't even. I don't have the right vocabulary words to describe what it's like there as far as dealing with the police. You don't want to cross paths with. It's a mafia. It's an outright mafia. Yeah. So, but again, it's because of the homogeneous of it. The people get along. I felt more safe there than I feel safe here. That is 100%. I can't stress that enough. I feel more unsafe here with people around me than I did in Cambodia.
Now, you know what's interesting? You have a perspective that you too, because a foreign country that you've lived in for a period of time. Now, when you hear numbers like Chicago just hit their 400th murder since the beginning of the year, and we're not even through the year yet, 400. L.A. and New York combined, it's about 355 or something like that. About 300 and change. What does China think of crime in America when they hear numbers like that?
Oh, so this is funny. So China has a really difficult issue with the U.S. because we're their number one trading partner. The people and everybody knows that we are the model for their economic, development. So they can't vilify us. But then they want to vilify us. They want us to be the bad guy, but then they can't say we're the bad guy. And so they're always doing this juggling act. So what they'll do is they'll blow any crime story. They'll just blow that way out of proportion. Just be on the cover of every newspaper in China. The school shooting, forget it. They love it when there's a school shooting or something. Yeah. Or, Chicago, 400 deaths. It's better.
So they know about that.
They know about it.
The people in China know about those numbers.
Yeah. And the government promotes it. The government makes sure that people knows it so that the people won't idealize America too much.
That's interesting.
The Europeans do this too. I mean, you have to be a little bit of a diplomat because you're dealing with so many different groups of people in a international city. like inside in Cambodia, you bumping into people from Moldova, from South Africa. So you have to play a little bit of diplomacy, and they think everyone has guns and we're just walking around shooting everybody, eating bacon, and preaching, the Bible, So and try to explain to people that it's definitely not like that.
Now, the young people in China, let's say Dan's age 20, are they an informed populace?
No. Well, I mean, the only media, all the media is owned by the government. So there's no free media at all. The internet, any Google type product is blocked. So you don't have YouTube, you don't have Facebook, you don't have, and then any newspaper that's known to frequently write negative things about China is blocked. So Wall Street Journal and New York Times and things like that are blocked.
So is this station heard in China? Probably not.
Only on my Facebook page.
So now you do research for the China. You do research. Last time you were talking about your research that you do for Trump. So how do you obtain the news if all these things are blocked?
So I have a VPN on my computer, so I can access. I can access anything that's blocked. I can access it, and then through my job, because we're an Australian university, our server is actually in Australia. So I have access to all the dissertation databases and research sources that are.
You can do that while you're in China.
Yeah, I can do all that in China.
How common is the VPN? Because I know that's their basically like only outline, pipeline to outside.
It's very common. When I first was teaching in China 5 years ago, I remember I asked my students, I said, does anybody have a VPN? And out of 30 students, it would be like 1 or 2. And today, when I ask, generally all of them have VPNs now.
So how does the government feel about that? That kind of defeats the purpose of censoring, right?
Well, so there's a company called PandaPal, which has the only VPN that you can actually install if you're already in China. Mm-hmm. Foreigners always make this mistake. They arrive in China and go, I need a VPN. I'm like, I'm too late. You can't install it here. Yeah, but PandaPal can be installed. And guess who the owner of PandaPal is?
The one who owns Alibaba?
The government.
Oh, the government, okay.
No, it's not actually the government. It's like closely tied to the government. So I think that's hilarious. Like they've created a problem and then they'll sell you a solution.
Danny, let's say millennials, kids your age, how do most of you and your friends get your news? So when you talk about something in
Social media.
Social media.
All social media.
Now, do you watch Fox?
I watch the news, but I'm telling you, kids my age do not watch the news. They get everything from Facebook. And the thing is, when they put it on Facebook, they only put out the juicy information, and they leave out, like when Trump when he shook hands with the
A little closer to the mic.
when they shook hands with the I think it was it Poland, when he shook hands with the first lady, it looked they made it look like he got ignored by her.
Right,
But
I remember that.
You remember that? Yeah.
Yes, I do.
On Facebook, they only had the small portion of it when it looked like she looked at Trump, walked right past him, and went straight to his wife. They do things like that all the time. All the time.
So it's skewed.
It's very skewed, yeah. And the people who make the articles, you really never find out who it is. It's just a page, or it'll just get shared multiple times. And things like videos on Facebook, like the ones that get most shared, they come up on the top, so they get viewed by more and more people, and it's just like a chain reaction, like an avalanche. It's just bigger and bigger and bigger.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So let's say a 20-year-old in China is not going to have the same knowledge base as a 20-year-old here.
Sorry to butt in, but also a lot of like Twitter, things like that, like Snapchat, all those are making push to make news actually a big part of their new platform. So they understand that millennials and kids like my age get their news from social media. So all of those sites are making pushes to make news appear more up on the news feed, so they can get their information.
So it gives Google a lot of power.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because they can control, in a sense, what a generation is thinking.
Well, look at YouTube trends. If you go to the trends, you'll see that they already push NBC and Washington Post and whatever Stephen Colbert and they push that hard when that's really not trending at all.
Yeah, there was a scandal not too long ago. I forget which social media thing it was, but they were putting stuff in the trending categories that weren't actually trending to get just like you were saying.
You
just
always
to get
see
people to get into it when it's not actually very relevant. They just want to create a storm of attention on something.
So we take for granted, being here in America, what we have access to. Because I can put on Fox. I could watch CNN. I could watch Rachel Maddow if I feel like it. We have access to so much here. We take for granted that in other parts of the world, like I'm sure in Russia, you don't have access to the things we have here.
Right. It's true. That's right. Yeah, and then also just in the culture, they try and inbreed into the people or ingrain into the people that they won't have curiosity. So that's a very interesting thing. Like when I was in Burma, I met people that risked their lives to exchange paperback books. You know, they would know who had a book they hadn't read, and they'd go in the middle of the night and knock, can I borrow that book? Because they were thirsting for knowledge, and and if you were foreign, if they could get away from prying eyes, they would pin you down. Please tell me what's going on in the outside world. They were really curious. China is not like that. They've ingrained into the people kind of a lack of curiosity of the outside world. And I think that part of it is there's so much, the government owns so many media. There's like countless newspapers, and they all, just like here, there's like left, there's right, there's whatever, but they're all doing the party line. And they even argue with each other. It's hilarious, but the whole thing is planned. So the people go, I have access to news.
So in Burma, a guy with a backpack and a bunch of books could be like a drug dealer.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I got the latest publication here, right?
Yeah. In Burma, I mean, it was people were so desperate to find out what was happening in the outside world. China isn't like that because of the government media. I think people believe that they're actually informed.
But doesn't that, in a sense, weaken a nation?
Frank Vetro says, "Don't get used to the seat, Mr. Monk."
Okay.
Yeah, Frank, just
He's
come
watching
move
the
me.
show?
Yeah. Frank, 20 on red for me. 20 on red.
So where is he right now? Ask him. Where
Why
is
don't
he
you
right
call
now?
in, Frank, at the toll-free number, 888-583.
We only got 4 minutes.
888-583-9930. Call in, you bum.
Where do you think American-Chinese relations are going? So in other words, if you came back here in 5 years, let's talk about, let's say within Trump's presidency, certainly 4 years, maybe 8. Where do you see us going?
I really worry that America's relevance is decreasing, that our overall power is decreasing, our relevance is decreasing.
Why is that?
Particularly through the China One Belt One Road. You know, they're building this Belt and Road project. They're going to every country in this long chain of countries, loaning them money for infrastructure. Chinese companies are building the infrastructure, collecting the money back, and then the country now owes, interest to China. China's, in some cases, for example, Sri Lanka couldn't pay their Belt and Road debts, so they gave China their port and their airport. Other countries, like in Micronesia now, China wants to build a military base there. They've offered Philippines a military base. They built one in Djibouti now. So I think that as we move forward, China's increasing their wealth and power, and I'm really worried that the U.S. is losing its power. And China, and I get the impression that their strategy is eventually U.S. is just going to be irrelevant. We're going to be, has been, we're going to be England, the England of the next. Not even England. We're going to be
Portugal.
We're going to be Portugal.
What do you think, Nicholas?
Portugal. Well, I know they bought the port in Pakistan also,
Yeah.
right? And also, how many are coming here in America? They pool all their money and they're buying up property here, right here in New York. It's, most Americans don't see it. We're focused on Muslims and we're focused
Right.
on this and the Somalians in Minnesota. Well, the Chinese are relatively quiet. They keep to themselves and they're just slipping right through and buying America out from underneath it.
What do you think, Dan? I know you don't, you've never been to China and you're not sure how they think, but what do you see, let's say 5 years from now, and you're very young, so you got your whole life ahead of you, 10, 20 years from now, where do you think it's going?
Something going back to what he said about, they're definitely trying to increase their global presence. They want, like you said, they want a more, they want us to take more of a backseat to them. They're definitely getting more aggressive and more. They definitely have a lot of balls. What they're doing in the South China Sea, they're getting very, very aggressive, and they keep testing us. And we have enough people testing us in that part of the world, Russia, North Korea, and I feel like they're trying to take advantage of that with all the chaos and all of us, directing energy towards certain things. I feel like they're trying to take advantage of that.
Well, what Nicholas said is very interesting because he said a lot of it we're focused on ISIS and Muslims and, Michigan and Minnesota, and it's almost like China, in a sense, and it's oversimplification, almost like a sleeper cell.
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Where they come here, they're buying things up, but we're not really paying attention.
Right.
They outnumber you, and people forget that. There's how many? 1.52 billion.
Wait, let me think. There's my friend. There's that other guy. Yeah, 1.3 billion.
They pool.
Don't
their
forget the
money
guy across the
together.
street.
Oh, yeah.
All right, yeah, got
and,
him.
And he's got 2 kids.
He delivers.
Right. And we're definitely losing. I think I think it's already too far. Build a wall, whatever. I think for me, unfortunately, I think it's already too far gone
That's
for
depressing.
this country.
That's
Sorry,
depressing.
it is.
I hope you're wrong. And, you
Oh,
know,
but he's right. Even here in the city, even here in New York City, the amount of real estate that is owned
By foreigners.
right?
It's-
You know, it's really I mean,
China government has the it's called the China Investment Company, which is the sovereign wealth fund. So basically, what that is, that this money you hear about, that China has the largest cash reserves, right? So they have a company that invests the money for the government. That's the sovereign wealth fund. Their headquarters is in New York City, and they bought BlackRock. They bought a couple of very large investment banks in the U.S., and they're buying into real estate companies. So a lot of times when you hear these, especially in conspiracy media, and they'll say, oh, Donald Trump's doing business with the Chinese. Yes and no. He's not. He's doing business with some company in New Jersey, right, who puts money into one of his projects. But then it turns out that company is owned 50% by the China Sovereign Wealth Fund. So a lot of the real estate in Manhattan is actually being bought up by the Chinese government.
Interesting. I see that it is 9 o'clock. Listen, Antonio, I really want to thank you. Nicholas, thank you very much for coming on. Dan, I want to thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
It's
you
a
so
great
much,
show.
Mr. Phil.
You guys are welcome anytime. I don't know when you're going to be back in the country because you're going to go back to China.
Yep, go back
Okay.
to China.
Frank is
But,
poolside, by the way.
He's
Poolside.
okay. Thank you very much. Listen, thanks for watching, listening. I hope you enjoyed the show tonight. I hope you learned a lot. I did. Some scary things I've learned tonight. But you have a good night. And next Tuesday, hopefully Frank won't get into too much trouble, and he will be back on Standing on Principle.